People think they understand Rosa Ushiromiya, and that confidence is usually what gets in the way. She gets called unstable, cruel, volatile, a bad mother who can't control herself, and that label sticks. Everything else she does starts looking like confirmation. It becomes very easy to stop looking any deeper than that. But Rosa doesn't behave like someone who's lost all sense of right and wrong. She behaves like someone who still believes she has one. She works, she survives, she makes decisions when she has to, and when she explains herself, she doesn't even sound delusional. She sounds tired, defensive, like someone who's been cornered for a long time and has learned how to justify herself. She talks about responsibility, about doing what has to be done, about being the only adult in the room, and sometimes you can follow that logic. The problem is that it never stays still. It shifts depending on fear, pressure, and how close she feels to losing control of her life again. There's a line from psychiatrist R.D. Lang. The experience of the other threatens one's self-experience. It must be defended against. Rosa lives like that. Other people just don't challenge her. They throw her off. And every interaction feels like something that could take away what little control she has left. Rosa's tragedy isn't that she fails morally. It's that she stops believing morality was ever meant to protect someone like her. Rosa didn't grow up with room to breathe. By the time we meet her, she's already been worn down by years of being the youngest sibling in a family that treats weakness like a liability, independence like something to be ashamed of. She's expected to keep up, to stand on her own, to never ask for help, and at the same time, she's never allowed to forget where she stands in the hierarchy. There's always someone above her, someone watching, someone ready to remind her that she doesn't quite measure up. That pressure doesn't stay in the background, it follows her in every decision she makes. Money is always tight. Stability never feels secure. One mistake feels like it could collapse everything she's barely holding together. Rosa is carrying the weight of being a single parent without a safety net, of knowing that if she fails, there's no one coming to catch her or Maria. That fear doesn't really turn off. It's constantly under the surface, shaping how she reacts, how she speaks, and how quickly she reaches for control when things start to slip. She's also carrying resentment, even if she won't admit it. Resentment towards her family for the way they boxed her in. Resentment toward a life that didn't turn out the way she imagined. Resentment towards her husband who abandoned her. And sometimes, without even meaning to, that resentment leaks out to the person closest to her, the one who depends on her the most, Maria. What makes this weight so dangerous isn't that it just exists, but that Rosa never really gets to put it down. There's no space for rest, no pause where she can sort out through what she's feeling. Everything has to be handled now, immediately, before it turns into something worse. And that constant urgency leaves no room for reflection, only reaction. Over time, that pressure reshapes her. It teaches her that control starts to matter more than understanding, that survival comes before kindness. These aren't choices she makes once, they're habits. The kinds of habits that seem to keep things from collapsing. This is what she is standing on. Not cruelty for its own sake, but a life built on constant strain, where fear, responsibility, and resentment pile up until they become impossible to separate. And once that kind of weight settles in, it doesn't just affect what you do anymore, it changes how you decide what even feels right at all. Rosa doesn't stop loving Maria just because she's overwhelmed. That's what makes everything that follows so hard to sit with. Her love doesn't disappear, it becomes complicated. Maria becomes the center of Rosa's world, not because she wants control for its own sake, but because Maria is the only thing she can't afford to lose. She's the proof that Rosa's life means something, that all of it meant something, that the compromises and humiliations led somewhere. And when you put that much meaning onto one person, every small mistake starts to feel like it matters too much. Rosa wants Maria to be safe, to be normal, to be accepted. And beneath all that, she wants Maria not to leave her. That fear sits just under the surface of every interaction. When Maria doesn't listen, when she escapes into her fantasies, when she believes in witches, when she refuses to respond the way Rosa needs her to, it doesn't feel like disobedience anymore. It feels like rejection. So Rosa reacts. Not always with cruelty, at least not to her. Sometimes it's shouting. Sometimes it's threats. Sometimes it's sudden physical punishment that seems to come out of nowhere. When Maria acts out or retreats into her own world, Rosa doesn't experience it as a child coping in her own way. She experiences it as defiance, as distance, as proof that she's already failing, and that fear doesn't stay contained. This is where her judgment starts to slip. Responsibility starts to turn into suspicion, into accusation. Protecting herself starts to feel the same as telling the truth. The unsettling part is it doesn't feel dishonest to her. In the moment, it feels clear. Her reactions feel justified because they line up with the story her fear is already telling her. And once that story takes hold, anything that threatens it just feels dangerous. Rosa isn't deliberately lying to herself. She is narrowing her view until only the explanations that don't tear her apart are left standing. This is where her morality starts to become unreliable, not through a single cruel decision, but through a way of thinking that keeps choosing emotional safety over accuracy. Over time, her confidence grows even as what she understands starts to shrink, and the gap between what she believes in and what is happening becomes harder to see. By the time Rosa reaches moments where accusations come easily, where blame feels obvious, her mind's already done most of the work. To everyone else, it feels sudden. To her, it doesn't, which is why her actions come off as shocking to Battler, George, and Jessica. To them, Rosa has always been the adult, kind, mature Aunt Rosa. When Rosa's fear-driven way of thinking runs into other people, it doesn't soften, it hardens. By this point, she isn't just reacting to situations as they happen, she starts anticipating them, filling in the gaps before anyone else can. Even neutral things start to feel loaded, like everyone is already thinking the worst of her, even if no one has said anything out loud. This is where her judgment becomes dangerous, because once you start feeling like the world's constantly weighing you, it starts to feel reasonable to strike first, to name a culprit, to pin the blame on someone else before it pins itself on you. For example, she'll openly declare Battler as the culprit in certain episodes without concrete evidence or reasoning. Blame becomes a way to stabilize things, a way to turn her fears into something solid and understandable. That's why when everything starts to fall apart on Rokenjima, Rosa doesn't hesitate the way you might expect. She reaches for certainty, immediately. She looks for someone to hold responsible, not because she's calm or rational, but because uncertainty starts to feel unbearable. Leaving things unresolved feels worse than being wrong. In her mind, accusing someone isn't an act of cruelty, it's drawing a line. This is where the danger is. Once she does that, her fear finally has a shape, and that shape is easier to live with than the idea that everything is truly out of control. What's unsettling is how confident she sounds when she does it. There's no hesitation, no real doubt, because by then, doubt feels like a weakness. Questioning herself would mean reopening all the fear that she's been desperately trying to keep contained. This is the point where Rosa's morality turns outward. Right and wrong stop being about truth and start being about preservation. Who threatens stability? Who feels unsafe? Who can be blamed without breaking the fragile sense of control she's built for herself? And the more she relies on that way of thinking, the more natural it becomes. Accusations stop feeling extreme. It starts feeling responsible. From the outside, this is where people lose sympathy for her. From her side, it's the opposite. Rosa doesn't live in a vacuum. Every decision she makes, every accusation, every grip on control pushes outward. It affects the people around her, whether she wanted to or not. Maria feels it first. Small mistakes, small disobediences, suddenly become disastrous. Rosa reacts as if the world itself depends on her getting it right, and Maria pays the cost. Rosa isn't plotting. She's reacting, trying to keep things from falling apart the way they always have. Her cruel childhood, being abandoned by her husband, left in debt, her failing company, all of it shows how things have fallen apart for her. But the way her fear structures her mind, even survival starts to feel like a moral act. And the sharper the fear, the more extreme the reaction, until what starts as protection begins to look very much like harm. What's easy to overlook is that Rosa doesn't just blame others because she's angry. She blames others because she's afraid. Every accusation, every punishment, every defensive move she makes is aimed at containing that fear. By this point, Rosa isn't reacting to situations anymore. She's interpreting them through a filter that only she can feel. Everything that happens, a look, a word, even a hesitation is measured against the weight she carries. And what it comes down to is fear. Not fairness, not truth, not even logic. Fear decides what matters and what's allowed. That's why she can accuse someone so confidently, not because she knows the truth, not because she's thinking about justice, because her mind has narrowed the options to what feels survivable. Morality isn't really guiding her anymore. It's bending around her. It stretches and twists, just so she can keep standing and keep Maria safe, to keep herself intact. Rosa's moral axis isn't missing. It's not broken. It's trapped under layers of responsibility, guilt, and resentment. Reshaped by circumstance until right and wrong feel fluid. Decisions that feel extreme under normal conditions feel necessary to her. And because her actions feel justified internally, she rarely questions them, even when they cause harm. This isn't about her being evil, it's about what pressure does to judgment. Every accusation, every punishment, every defensive move she makes is like a thread pulled tight by fear. And the tighter those threads get, the less room there is for empathy or reflection. By now, it's clear why Rose is so unpredictable morally. She isn't flipping from good to bad, She's moving through a world where her moral compass is no longer pointing outward at truth or fairness, but inward at survival. Battler works as a mirror here, even if it's subtle. He escaped the rigid hierarchy of Rokenjima, built relationships, built friendships, and created freedom she could never reach. His presence reminds her of the life she was denied, the freedom she never had. That awareness, buried under fear and responsibility, shows up as resentment, a kind of jealousy that starts to shape how she reacts. Pointing the finger at him isn't strategy, it's reflex. It's frustration finding an outlet. What makes this so tragic is how much they parallel each other. Rosa, in a sense, was trapped on Rokenjima during her childhood and couldn't escape her life or her family, while Battler did the complete opposite. During his fallout with Rudolph after his mother's death, he left the family for an extended period. He did what Rosa couldn't do in her childhood: leave. There are more layers to this tragedy. The tragedy, and the haunting part, is that she doesn't even see it. From her perspective, she's making the only choices that make sense, the only ones that keep her standing, and that's what makes her moral unreliability so complete. It's not really a mistake, it's structure. It's built into the way she has to live. Eventually, the pressure that Rose has carried for years reaches a point where it can't be contained anymore. Every small act of control, every moment where she forced herself to keep moving forward, piles up until it presses down on her from all sides. Thinking clearly starts to become nearly impossible. Fear, responsibility, resentment, exhaustion, it all builds quietly, and suddenly there's no room left to breathe, no space left to weigh one's choice against another, and every action feels urgent. Her love for Maria is still there, as it always has been, but it's tangled with everything else she carries. Protection is almost inseparable from harm, care almost inseparable from fear, and every action she takes to keep her daughter safe also risks hurting her. And because she can't pause, because there's never a safe moment to, these small acts of harm accumulate, layer by layer, until the consequences feel heavier than anything she thought she could bear. By the time it all comes crashing down, it isn't dramatic, it's quiet, cumulative, inescapable. And in that weight, her morality doesn't vanish, it bends, warps, stretches, to hold the pieces of herself together in a world that never gave her room to do it any other way. As Albert Camus once said, the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become absolutely free, that your very existence is an act of rebellion. For Rosa, freedom was always just out of reach. She carried responsibility, fear, and regret instead, and the moral framework she had to rely on bent underneath that weight. Camus's words remind us that freedom and the ability to choose can distort into something unrecognizable. Watching Rosa, the haunting part isn't her cruelty, or even her mistakes. It's that she acts the only way she can, and that way carries consequences she can't fully control or foresee. Survival reshapes her judgment, and in that reshaping, morality itself becomes fragile, unreliable, and human. And so, we must ask ourselves, if the weight of a life you never chose pressed down on you the same way it pressed down on Rosa, would you have made different choices, or ended up the same way?